I've always been a bit of a loner. Shy by nature, I kept to myself a lot growing up and seemed to naturally aspire to be alone in the outdoors. Later on, I was among the last of the Gen Xers to take to social media. I didn't want anybody to find me, didn't want to share anything about myself or publicize my life in any way. Of course, like most everyone, I eventually gave in and grew out of that, at least to an extent. But even later on, I had my YouTube channel set up years before I finally published a video. Strange then that at the beginning of day 2, my first instinct, well, after coffee of course, was to check my Facebook feed, share my location, and the craziness of the previous day. While I knew this was a luxury afforded me by my proximity to civilization, I also recognized that it was precisely this type of connection I was trying to escape on a canoe trip. 15 minutes spent on my phone was somehow much more than that in time lost disconnecting from the natural beauty surrounding me. How ironic is that? To literally disconnect from disconnection. When else would I get the opportunity to have a place like this all to myself? So why was social media drawing me in? Well, for one thing, I still wasn't 100% certain I was okay to be camped at this spot, so I was looking for some reassurance. Fortunately, the ML Facebook group came through nicely on that front. Well, all except Gord, who responded with something like, "Better get going before the Sunday sunbathers show up." Oh, get bent. I was just starting to wipe the cobwebs of sleep from my mind, and everything was creaking after a completely exhausting day 1. After all, I'd worked really hard to get here. Didn't I deserve some quality downtime? What's more, I felt like I'd found the perfect spot on the perfect morning. The sun slowly rising, bathing the sight in slanted rays of early morning light. The waves gently lapping at shore, birdsong hovering. The air sweet with the scents of early summer flora. I just wanted to lap all this up over 1 or 6 cups of coffee. Unfortunately, the power boaters didn't have the same instincts, and the single dull drone of an engine off in the distance slowly grew to several hums, and finally an incessant frenzy of high-pitched whines. Of course, the Big East loomed before me. With a reputation for creating adversity, it certainly wasn't setting up to be an easy ascent, so there really wasn't any time to lose. My goal for the day was to escape the residential community bordering the lower section of the river, which essentially meant getting somewhere east of the eastern boundary of Arrowhead Park. By my calculations, that would mean traveling approximately 24 kilometers upriver. Since there wasn't any sign of whitewater in this section of the map, I presumed that the primary challenges would be shallow water and a swift current. Oh, and of course the baking sun of an early summer heat wave charring my lily-white skin and roasting me inside and out.
It'll be a big day of slogging ahead. Paddling so far, we'll see how long this goes. Setting any speed records, that's for sure. It's bloody hot, so I'm going to need to hydrate a lot, and I'm going to need probably a few swims along the way. Big day coming up. Big day. Hello, Mr. Catfish. Swim time. Well, woo! Oh man, oh that stinks. Oh, the air may be hot, but the water is cool.
This section of the river cuts through a sand plain that stretches from Lake Vernon all the way up to the Williamsport Bridge. The river meanders down an ongoing series of oxbows, sculpting sandbars on the inner edges of the curves and high banks on the outers. The flow of the river through spring flood, heavy rains, and summer droughts creates a constantly evolving landscape. Though thrilling to behold, this early in the season especially, every switchback means a surge in the current as the main flow is rerouted. In paddling up these bends, the trick is to take the inner edge where the eddy has formed as far up as possible before crossing the eddy line into the main flow. Sometimes this was easily managed. More often, the bends were severe enough that the inner edge of oxbow became extremely shallow and exceptionally difficult to paddle. And of course, crossing the eddy line required proper maneuvering to ensure the angle of the boat was narrow enough that the current wouldn't take hold of the bow and whip it downstream before I even had a chance to power around the bend. For this exercise, I was grateful for the symmetrical shape of my prospector, which was equally responsive to bow and stern maneuvering strokes. Nevertheless, at times the river was simply too shallow and the current too great to manage paddling, and on these occasions I resorted to tracking or wading. Those were the kinds of places where a thorough grounding in pulling techniques would have been extremely useful. Historical weather data tells me Huntsville reached a high of 32 Celsius that day. Funny, it felt much hotter than that as I slowly wound my way upstream. Periodic swims became essential, and I made a point of pausing every hour or so, or wherever a convenient sandbar appeared, to take a quick plunge. Regardless of these efforts, however, the heat was stifling and my progress slow. The river snaked its way up 14 kilometers of cottage country, Every time the natural landscape came to dominate the scene for any length of time, and my mind would start to stray toward the fantasy of entering an actual wilderness, rude reminders would suddenly appear. Bright neon paddle boats nudged against shore, large speed limit signs posted on the banks, groups of screeching young children playing with huge inflatables in the shallows. Indeed, as the hours passed by and the heat and humidity became overwhelming, it seemed my mind was starting to play tricks on me. Picture yourself in a boat on a river. You're loaded for bear with over 2 weeks' worth of food and supplies. It feels like 35 degrees Celsius in the shade. You're slowly paddling your way upstream, surrounded by sandbars and high dunes. You turn a corner to see a group of middle-aged adults floating toward you, each in his or her own giant inner tube, sipping on coolers. You shake your head as you wonder to yourself how they could get it so wrong, and did you really just see that? You shrug it off, carry on. But a few minutes later, you round another bend to behold a giant purple unicorn nestled on shore at River Right. Whoa. Pretty sure I didn't put anything special in that morning coffee. Maybe the heat's getting to me in more ways than I thought. Okay, time for another cool down.
Well, if you can believe it, I believe I'm finally about to pass underneath Highway 11. There's traffic on this, that's what it's got to be. Actually, maybe I'm not going to pass under it. Maybe I'm just... No, looks like I'm going to follow it for a while. That's nice. And then I'm going to pass under it. Of course, if it's passing under it, it'll be too good. Alright, false alarm. Hello, you dancers. finally into some kind of stuff that this river obviously got its reputation for. Unfortunately, it's just hitting me right at the end of the day when I'm tired. That's not a good combination. But I'm going to try just to get it up this rapid. I'm going for a while already at it.
Every good trip has its defining moments. Those special vignettes that come straight to the fore in one's memory years, even decades later, when recalling an expedition. Often these episodes are steeped in adversity. That crazy thunderstorm that came out of nowhere, drenching you and all your gear. The swamp that was too shallow to paddle and swallowed you up when you tried to wade. The portage from hell. Whatever it is, there's an inescapable pride that comes from having survived and overcome it. And at the end of the day, it is always those moments that, strangely, make a trip worth doing at all. That make it your trip. Over nearly 5 decades of canoeing through Algonquin and other areas, I've got a fair number of those moments stored up in my memory. But until now, I'd never actually caught one of them on camera. Let's pause there. Wow. Looking back on this, it's all so beautifully crystal clear in my mind. How a single foot placement changed the course of the whole trip. Taking it from an expedition I had carefully planned and was in command of, to one that was suddenly in command of me. No, I wasn't really injured. After a few moments, I was able to straighten everything out and collect myself. It was something else altogether. Did you see it? Let's look again. Yes. The famous lost croc of the Meanest link.
Wilson! Wilson!
Yeah, I got a lot of airtime out of this on the Facebook group. Enough to last pretty much through the rest of that summer. But what few people realized at the time was how significant this episode became in shaping the remainder of this trip, and how it turned a 2-week expedition into a summer-long quest. Of course, the real story wasn't the false step or the lost croc at all. Rather, it was the poor choice of footwear. My hiking boots were right there on the floor of the canoe, ready to be put on at any moment. But I was too hot and overcome with the humidity, fog-minded, and again being stubborn. Is that a theme of this series?
Tragedy. Tragedy, my friends. Tragedy on the Big East. Lost one of my Crocs. My left foot Croc
All day I'd been paddling above a sandy river bottom, but over the last hour, a subtle change had taken place, and sand began to give way to gravel, gravel to rocks and occasional small boulders. I was aware of the change for sure. Every time I got out to wade, pebbles were working their way through the holes in my Crocs and in around at the opening at the heel, disrupted by my footsteps and forced into place by the raw current. Oh, I knew it was happening, but I once again stubbornly refused to deal with it, rationalizing that camp was just around the next bend on the closest sandbar, the one that never actually appeared.
And then I thought about what can I do? Like, could I get it back possibly? And it was floating away. I could see it floating down the river. But anyway, so I actually did. I decided, okay, well, you know what? I've got the boat. I'm going in the right direction. So I turned the boat around and got in the boat and I took the boat down the river for a spell, and I couldn't find it. It's gone. So anyway, I just decided, you know what, I came back this far, I'm on this gravel bar. This is a very small gravel bar, but guess what? It's home tonight. So I'm gonna plunk down camp right here, probably put the tent over there, and maybe get a little fire going for those burgers. You know what, I got that beer, that second Genesee. I will toast the missing crock. Memories gone by. Very sad. Fortunately, those guys are all on the outside of my screen. But I was hearing this sound, I thought it was like rain.
Lucky for me, it wasn't rain. A closer look at the gravel bar shows it wouldn't have taken much to raise the water level enough to completely flood out my campsite. As it was, rain appeared to be on the horizon for day 3, but for the moment I would be able to make a clean break from camp. On the agenda for today, get as far up the river as I could. It was clear I was now getting into the ugly section of the Big East, and wading would become the primary means of ascending the current through rocky shallows and rapids. What I didn't know at the time was just how serious an exercise this would become. Reading about it can never do it justice. You have to experience the process firsthand.
Starting to get smart, maybe. I put away the DSLR, put it right, double waterproof bag, and my iPhone too. Shut it right down. Trying to get serious.
It doesn't matter how thick or robust the rubber tread on your shoes is. The rocks on the river bottom are coated in a thick and slick film of silt and algae that provides little, if any, purchase to this material. Over a year later, I learned that some linkers use traction devices on their shoes. Microspikes or even crampons have been leveraged for the purpose. Wish I'd thought of that.
There you go. Very slippery, very slippery.
As it was, my strategy was simple. Wear a medium heavyweight hiker with a strong outsole that would protect my foot. Then take each step slowly and deliberately.
Well, basically I gotta cross the current here over this way.
The surface of a rapid may be readable for downstream paddling, but wading hour after hour up kilometers of bubbling froth and boulder-strewn maelstroms proved to me quite convincingly how little it betrays of the river bottom beneath. Only rarely can you actually see what you're stepping on, or into, so each foot placement is a reach out into the darkness. Almost like a game of chance. Where will my foot land this time? Throw the dice. See what happens.
Here we go again.
There are the places where the base is relatively flat, the stones like pebbles. Those tended to be the shallow areas and were generally the easiest to navigate. Then there are the deeper spots, with larger rocks that are less settled and more prone to displacement. Then, of course, there's the pillows, the downstream V's, and the wedges, where larger stone slabs and boulders reach to just beneath the surface or emerge above it, and the depth becomes unpredictable. I'd push up a V with the water shallowing out beneath me, up and over, only to step into a sinkhole on the upstream end, my feet gently sinking down, searching for a purchase. Hit a boulder which provides none, and wait for my foot to slip down further and get wedged firmly between rocks. Only then could I gain any leverage or stability. Slow and steady was the name of the game.
Okay, so now this situation right here, I just have a strong feeling because this is looking too deep here. I have a feeling there's a big hole there. So instead of going that way, I'm going to cut over to the far side of the river. Now, this could go the wrong way. Yeah, starting to get deep, and I got deer flies coming after me, but it's too strong for me to paddle, well, not too strong to paddle, too strong to get in. So that current is real strong. It's trying to knock me off my feet, but I leaned forward a little bit, I got it. Just got to take every step very slowly. It's the only way. I had a feeling I should be on the other side of the boat for this, just in case it goes hairy. So, it appears that I just got sucked into, into taking the wrong turn, and as a result, I came up this, which apparently was a big circle out around that way. See if I can show you on the GPS.
Having waded up several small rapids this morning, I was quite happy to encounter a lovely, calm section of water to dip my paddle in, until I suddenly realized the river was coming to an end. Uh-oh. Granted, there was still a lot I didn't know about the Big East at this point, but one thing I did know: there were many kilometers and several landmarks ahead of me before I'd escape it, and the path out was a marked portage on River Right. So where the heck was I?
Battle mine, I'm gonna have to drag all this crap across and over here and down this little slide, so it's okay.
It turns out I'd taken a wrong turn up a very large oxbow lake. I'll be honest, I'd never heard of this phenomenon before, and I was pretty confused by what I was looking at. It seemed that I had somehow ascended above river level by paddling up this side channel, which for some reason doubled back toward the river. In researching this subject, in Googling this subject later, I learned how oxbow lakes are formed. Pretty cool stuff, especially when observed to this extreme. To put it in lay terms, the flow of the river had eroded the banks to such an extent that it carved a new path for itself over time, cutting off the existing oxbow by directly connecting two parallel points. The oxbow is still there, but it no longer flows. Instead, it just lures in unsuspecting upstream paddlers.
Yeah, getting a bit tiring for sure. And it's only 12 o'clock right now. I'm going to stop here and just get a snack. Time for more fun.
I mention that I didn't have Jeff's map with me for this section? The topos I'd purchased dated from something like 1981 and were short on detail, especially when it came to rapids and portages. Although I'd loaded Backroads map book on my GPS, well, we just saw its limitations back at the Oxbow Lake.
Hitting a low here. It's only day 3, but I'm hitting a low. I just spent, I don't know, a long time and a whole pile of effort trying to chase up that opening there, which I thought was the beginning of a portage trail. Maybe it is, but I would just see, I would see a faint trail. And that's what led me on it in the first place. Faint trail, and then it would peter out and turn into thick bush. Faint trail, peter out, turn into thick bush. Finally I hit a big hill, went right up the hill. And I don't know if what I'm looking at is game trails or actual portage. I don't think it's a portage, because when you look over there, that's a pretty high hill top there. This side looks more promising over here, but I don't know. I don't know where the trail would begin, if there is one. I don't see it. I don't have the information I need to be able to complete this section properly, and I'm kind of despairing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plunk down right here and try to recoup some energy and eat lunch, and we'll see how I feel. I'd like to be able to find the energy. Like I can keep waiting. It's just that the rocks are so slippery.
One of my objectives in filming this trip was to capture all the highs and lows, especially the raw grind where things got the toughest. Back in the winter, I'd attended a seminar on filming backcountry adventures. The lecturer pointed out that those times when things are the most adverse and one least feels motivated to film are the moments most worth capturing. They are by nature, after all, the most authentic. At the time, I remember noting this as a key point to keep in mind when out on my trips. There's no doubt that my attempt to portage around the so-called Boulder Bash, the resulting despair when I couldn't, and the ultimate resolve that saw me force my way up the rapids step by step, was one of those episodes. Yet when I got home and reviewed all my footage, it was missing. What happened? Had I lost an SD card somewhere?
I'll just have to take it one step at a time, I guess.
No, I didn't have that excuse. I had failed.
Well, I made it.
Turns out it's easy to sit in a comfortable theater getting all jazzed about pushing yourself to the max, capturing amazingly cool footage. It's quite another to be out there, alone, struggling to find the courage to continue. Somehow the camera suddenly becomes a lot less important when things get real. In fact, looking back, I'm pretty sure I made the conscious decision not to film it. The situation just felt far too serious for such a gratuitous exercise. Of course, now I hate that I don't have the footage to share. But you know how these things go. You only ever get one shot at it. Even if I could go back and do it again, it could never be the same. I've been there, done that. The rawness is gone, and the camera would show that. In fact, I did go back this past summer and took this rapid in stride. No big deal.
Like, look at that. Look at that. major landslide action right there. Well, I do believe we have made it to MacArthur's chute. It is 6:40, so it's all right. We come through here. Looks like this is actually a bit of a campsite. So you know what? Maybe I'll stay here. Seems a bit bug infested, to be honest, but it's the first campsite looking campsite that I've been to. And I think through here. Oh yeah. Oh wow. Look at that. Gorgeous. I don't think we can wade up that one. Look at these rocks here. This is huge. Slightly treacherous. As in steep incline, but man, gorgeous.
In the end, I decided to pass on the campsite and try to push on to Distress Lake. I mean, after all, it was only maybe 3 kilometers or so away. Surely I could manage that in another hour or so and still reach a nice lakeside campsite before dark. Of course, before I can even get started, I'd first have to haul all my gear over the giant granite slab pile that passed for a portage around MacArthur Chute. But hey, how hard could it be?
This is the hard part. Oh boy, there's nothing here. Okay, well, man, every time she hits like that, it's just like, but I gotta get this off of here. Jesus, I just can't make it up here. Anyway, no. Woo! Believe it or not, this was an easier way. Okay, baby, I'm sorry, but I got two big spreads. Can't make it. Heavy drag. I like to treat my boats. Dear God.
Ah, sweet relief. Now all I had to do was wait up a few more kilometers of churning whitewater, including something called Lucifer's Ledge, then portage another 700 meters uphill, and I'd be home for the night. Yeah. Good luck with that.